Welcome to the Elite Level Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Elaine, and this is the podcast where we explore how elite level performers think, act, and operate. As always, if you're watching this on YouTube, I would really appreciate if you could hit that like button, comment, share, and subscribe. And if you're listening on any of the podcasting platforms, I'd be really grateful for a 5-star review. Now, as always, we've got an absolutely fantastic guest here today. Ash, it's great to see you.
Hey, good to meet you, Alex. Great to be here. And let's see if we can make this a 5-star review. Eh?
Absolutely, Ash. So for those out there who don't know much about you, if you could tell us a little bit about your background and some of your career highlights.
Yeah, sure. So Ash Brinsford, I've been selling for 20 years, but really before that, my main passion in life has been sport. So I've played sport all my life until these days where I'm more of a watcher. But the teamwork, the camaraderie, the competition, the winning, the losing together, and then the friendships that have kind of ensued from sport have really helped me with my career. It seems weird actually talking about a career when you're only 40. But yeah, 20 years in sales, and I've basically done every job, Alex, from data entry through to SDR work, through to field work, right the way through to running a 120-person organization across Europe.
Wow, it's pretty incredible. A lot to unpack in all of that. So let's start with the sporting side, actually, Ash. You mentioned, especially off camera and also now on camera, that's been a massive part of your life and seems to be a staple part of your career as well. So just walk us through around your sporting background and why it's so important to your career.
Yeah, so I've played sport all my life, love everything with a ball, basically. Cricket was a huge thing for me growing up. I was a pretty competitive cricketer. But as I said, Alex, I just love the teamwork, love the camaraderie, love to just come home from school on a summer's day and just get playing, and that kind of drove me through basically. It's been a huge thing for me. Very quickly as well, I learned that I loved captaining a side. So I was captain for a good amount of the sports teams that I played in, and just the ability to kind of influence a game, influence a set of individuals, bring a team together for amazing outcomes just was phenomenal for us.
So Ash, you've spoken a bit there about your sporting background and how actually that's been pretty instrumental in your career when you look ahead. So let's just unpack a bit more about how sports has actually played such a staple role in both your personal and your professional life. Just walk us into what that was like.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I remember the days of the sun shining at school. Couldn't wait to get out of school and start playing sport. I think the thing that I really loved, Alex, though, was the teamwork, the camaraderie. Winning together as a team, the friendships that were built on the field, the battle. Like it just appealed to me, and all of those little facets within sport just really appealed to me. And I've basically taken that into the work environment from there.
Awesome. It sounds like fun, right? So you also mentioned the fact that you've pretty much done every role under the sun, from being an SDR. Of course, now you're a top tier leader. So let's start with those earlier days, whether it was you being an SDR or just your first couple of roles in sales. Just take us into those moments. Why did you actually end up getting into sales? And then what was the first experience like?
Yeah, so I remember my first experience. We were in a little office in Aldermaston, and we were selling an offline medical information system to GPs and healthcare professionals. Like, can you imagine getting time with GPs? Like now, even when you've got an illness, it's so difficult. But imagine way back then, 20 years ago, trying to sell an offline medical information system to GPs that didn't even have computers at the time. It was just so difficult. But I remember doing it and just absolutely loving it. We had a great team, great camaraderie. We used to post numbers on the board each day, and you wouldn't stop. You'd get in at 9 o'clock, you'd pick the phone up, you'd speak to practice managers. Suddenly you'd get a GP on the phone, and it was like you'd won the lottery. It was just an amazing experience. Obviously full of no's, full of disappointments, full of people putting the phone down on you, but just had to keep going through that. And I remember we were sort of paid, I think it was about £10,000 or £11,000 a year, right? That was our salary. And at the end of each week, there was the ability to kind of earn £200 at the end of each week. And that just felt, I mean, when you got to the end of the week and you'd hit your target and you'd made your £200, that was like being a payday millionaire. It was just phenomenal. Just having the cash there in a brown envelope, it was just fantastic. And I took it from there, Alex. Obviously, that's what really gave me the bug, was that ability to overachieve a basic salary. And I took it from there, went into distribution. So that was Computer 2000. Worked there for 4 years. That was 5.5 hours on the phone. Most of it was inbound, so it was different. It was a different type of selling. So I'd been used to outbound cold calling. Suddenly now I'm getting a swash of inbound, right? So it was just about putting the effort in, doing your 5 hours, doing your 5.5 hours, doing your 6 hours on the phone, and achieving from there. The people that achieved were putting those numbers in. The people that weren't were the guys that were doing 1, 2, 3 hours and making excuses and going out for cigarette breaks and everything else. So those were the early days, and that kind of hard work, endeavor, and everything else is still true to me and true to my core right now. I kind of learned it the hard way there, Alex.
So Ash, that's really interesting. Now, one of the things I'm curious about is we could kind of split things into two different eras in a certain regard, where that previous era that you've spoken about, hard work was on the front line, tenacity, running through walls, going out there and making it happen, getting the dials done. We look at the today era, and sometimes, people throw out the words entitled, or the amount of technology that's available, and sometimes just the mentality being different. I'd love to get your perspective on whether that's something that you've seen, you've observed, really what your perspective on that whole paradigm is.
Yeah, great question, Alex. So look, I feel like there's still a load of hard workers out there, but we live in an era now where everything's on demand. Things are easy. It's easy to order a takeaway and get it delivered to your house. It's easy to consume on-demand television. You remember us in our day, Alex, we probably had 4 terrestrial TV programs, and we had to wait for our television program to come on that we wanted to watch. It wasn't a case of just going to Netflix and having a whole raft. You had to wait. The same for selling, really. You look at it now, and you've got LinkedIn. LinkedIn has got millions and millions of people and possible prospects that you'd like to contact details are on there. It's just much easier than when we had a telephone, possibly a yellow pages, certainly not a website in those days. So you had to do the outreach in order to get the connections with people, to find out where the projects were and where you could sell to. So I do think there's many hardworking people out there these days. I just think with this on-demand culture, that we've got to a position where it's easy to be lazy sometimes. It's easy to wait, and I had that, Alex, a little bit as my career evolved. I talked to you about the 5 hours on the phone inbound. I talked to you previously about the targeting GPs and healthcare professionals outbound. I then got to a stage where I went to a company called Symantec, big, large cap security company. And I remember sitting on the inside sales floor, and the floor was silent. We had 40 sellers on that floor, and you could hear a pin drop. So as a new SDR coming in, I was kind of scared to pick up the phone and make mistakes. It was really difficult for a new guy coming in and sort of, can I speak to your IT security manager? Can I speak to your IT manager? And then fear of failure amongst a whole room of people that frankly weren't on the phone. And at that time, I got to a point where, I'd kind of be making 10, 20 calls a day, and it wasn't good enough, and I was failing. And I remember this one moment, Alex, where it was just as we were buying our first house, little house in the middle of Basingstoke, and I used to go to Asda, and I'd have my little budget for the week, and I remember it was Christmas, and I went there, load of stuff on the conveyor belt, and I'd miscalculated, and I'd put too much food on the conveyor belt, and I couldn't afford the food that was on there, and I had a new girlfriend at the time, and she was there. She's now my wife. A whole stack of people behind me, and I had to have the embarrassment of asking for items to be put back. And it was at that moment that I thought, hang on a minute, like something's got to give. That was my lowest ebb in effect in my career, and I thought something's got to give here. I've got to pay mortgages, I've got to put food on the table, and that isn't going to happen by me being silent on a silent sales floor. I've got to go in there tomorrow and I'm going to do 100 calls. Nobody had ever seen like 20 calls being made on that floor. I'm going to go in and make 100 calls and see what difference that makes. And we went from there.
That was a powerful moment there, Ash. And, I think a lot of us can probably relate to, let me just call it that moment, or a moment in life where, it's almost like everything hits you at once. And there's this period of realization where you have a decision to make. Either you're going to go out there and you're going to make it happen, or you're just going to let life run you. I can recall similar, and longer term listeners will know the story about me dropping out of university first time round with a scholarship, and just remembering that moment going home and feeling extremely alone, thinking, wow, I've gone from having the world at my feet to now nothing, and I want to be a salesperson. And everyone's looking at sales as a sector and as a space and saying, why would you want to be a salesperson? Why would you want to be in sales? Just frowning upon the whole thing. And then here we are, years and years later, being able to be on the Elite Level podcast, smile and chop it up on the topic. So I just love the fact that you shared that story, Ash. I'm grateful for that. Now, let's zoom back into your career. So you're at this point, going in there, tenacity, making these 100 calls, starting to make a name for yourself. Walk us back into that moment. How does your career start to evolve from there?
Yeah, so I remember it pretty vividly. So what was actually happening on that sales floor is that the inside salespeople weren't making the calls, but they were attaching themselves to run rate business that was coming in. We were fortunate at Symantec where there was a load of run rate business inside our mid-market that was just coming in, and those salespeople were attaching themselves to that. So I'd looked at the end of the quarter and it was like everyone had done 200K, 250K, 300K. And I thought to myself, how is this happening with nothing being done on the sales floor? And then I very quickly worked it out. There was me and another guy actually there. I'll tell you about him in a second. But me and another guy there, that kind of worked out what was happening, that they were attaching themselves to run rate business. And we made a pact with each other. We said, look, we're going to keep doing our 100 calls a day, and we're going to build bigger deals than the entire territory's run rate. And we're going to go out there, we're going to try and find those opportunities, implicate the pain, and really drive a sales cycle properly, not just try to attach ourselves to stuff that was already coming in from the channel. And we did that. What we did as well, though, in doing that is we were able to pull in other people from the organization. So as deals get bigger, as deals get more exciting, it's natural that other leadership people, managers, senior leaders, and the like want to attach themselves to those successes, basically. And what I thought that I did pretty well, and it still stays with me today, is I opened myself up and I brought those leaders in with me in the deals, because A, they were more experienced, and B, they were able to get stuff done internally that was always going to help with the deal. So that's what I did, and in doing that, we were successful. We closed some business. In fact, me and the guy that I was telling you about, a guy called Lorenzo Alfano, is just absolutely killing it at the moment in SaaS sales. We ended up as the top 2 inside sales reps in Europe that year. And that was from a base halfway through the year being like the worst performers. So we built real deals, we built real champions inside our business, and we were able to close significant transactions. But in doing that, we were then the first names on the team sheet for the promotion to external sales, because senior leadership had basically become aware of our skills. We'd built trust with them, and then it was very easy to transition from a telesales person to a field person, and that was the key. And that would be my recommendation to any kind of SDR wanting to get out of SDR into field sales, and actually any field sales wanting to become a first-line sales leader, is bring people on the way with you. Go and get senior leadership with you. Go and earn your spurs with those guys. Make them feel part of a team, and show that you can quarterback a situation. You can quarterback a deal. You can you can manage the resources both internally and with your customer, and just open yourselves up. Don't be these salespeople that sort of hide behind and opportunities not in Salesforce or anything like that. Open yourself up, bring people with you, and from there you build the trust, and then they trust you to do the next job and the next job and the next job.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. I love that concept of kind of bringing people with you, because I think one of the biggest questions that a lot of certainly our listeners have is around promotions, right? People, as you say, SDRs want to become account execs want to become managers, first line managers want to become second line managers. So it's a great principle that transcends all of those things. I do want to double tap on the account exec to manager transition, which I think is one of the ones that probably has less clarity around. I think people would really value your perspective on, because again, there's this discussion point around, does elite level performance almost give you an automatic entitlement to that step up into management? So I'd love to get really an Ash's perspective. What are the prerequisites and the key ingredients for you to know that someone is ready to take that step from account executive to first time manager?
Sure. And actually, if you look at the characteristics of the individual seller, the top performing internal seller or external seller, they're actually the same as a great frontline leader and a second line leader. And, despite a lot of books that will have you say that the two skill sets are totally different and everything else, and there's a social presence at the moment that says to be a leader, you need different capabilities than a seller. But if you actually break down what a true seller's capabilities and characteristics look like, hard work, endeavor, curiosity, accountability, teamwork, quarterbacking a deal, like all those elements there, being courageous, right? All those elements there transcend to first line sales leadership and even to second line sales leadership. Every single one of those, curiosity, hard work, endeavor, being courageous, like accountability, they're all key words and key phrases and key characteristics of your great frontline sales leaders. So for me, it was quite an easy transition for me from one to the other. I was a top performing AE and then got given the opportunity to go lead a team. But it's also, when I'm now looking for future leaders, I'm looking for those guys and girls that are out there with those characteristics, that are top performers, that with a tiny bit of coaching and direction can very easily make the step. What I find though, Alex, is, and I don't know your opinion on this, but what I find is that companies aren't really geared up to helping those individuals. Because what happens is you basically get the call and they say, right, there's an opening and we want you to do what you did as an individual seller, and we want you to teach a team of people and get them to your level. Off you go. Not much coaching, not much of a transition plan or anything like that, and you're just kind of left to get on with it, and you have to kind of figure out yourself. And that's the bit that I think is missing. I think the key characteristics from an individual contributor to a leader are very, very similar. It's the bit in between that I think companies are letting themselves down on. There's not enough coaching, training, and a succession plan between the two. And that's where companies need to start thinking about that.
Yeah, I would agree that there's definitely work to be done in that area for sure. When we look at training in general, right, there's a lot of availability, I think, or growing availability of resource to SDRs and to account executives. But when you look at leadership, there's probably less there, right, and less of a focus on actually how do you become a great leader. So I think it is a really valid point. The other side I would say to that is that, as with anything, there's almost two halves to it. There's the one half is the education piece, right? Getting the coaching and the knowledge and the understanding. But the other side of that is actually what that person is bringing to the table as to why they want that role in the first place. We see people wanting to become leaders because they think they were the top performing AE, so that's their token, as I mentioned earlier. But actually, do you care about developing talent? Do you want to help other people? How do you think about building a great culture and fostering a great environment from which you can actually nurture that talent? So I feel like there's almost those two paradigms to it, and sometimes one that gets neglected over and above the other one. Curious to see, do you lean into what I'm saying there, or do you see it differently?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've all, Alex, worked with managers and leaders over the time that have done things that we wouldn't now do in our roles, right? So if you think back, you get some leaders out there, some managers out there that just drive a desk, right? So these are the people that wake up on a Monday morning, great team meeting, set the goals for the week, let's get the team together, great. I call them bookend managers. So they wake up, get excited on a Monday, and then suddenly on the Thursday or Friday when it's time to forecast, they're up again. And it's, hey, what have you done for me lately? Where's the numbers? What are you doing? What's the next steps? What's the implication here, or the pain you're driving here? And why haven't you got a champion over there? And my view, mate, is that it's about what gets done between those days and between those two situations, Monday morning sales meeting and Friday forecast, that really where the rubber hits the road. That's the area where I think is a great AE, as you were, and the others have been that have become managers. As a great AE, that's the stuff that you're good at. Going and seeing the customers. When you turn up to meetings, have other customer context that you can bring to those meetings. So bring value to those meetings when you're in with your reps. And you get that because you've got such a great purview across many different customer conversations as the leader. You can bring those to bear in the meeting. Here's how we solved a problem in this large bank, or this retailer was able to drive efficiency of X by doing this. That's your job. Your job, I believe, is to be in the trenches with your team, protect your team, accelerate opportunities with your team, and just be accountable. Again, that word accountable. But being accountable isn't about showing up on a Monday for a team meeting and then showing back up on a Friday for a forecast.
Absolutely. Yeah, completely with you, Ash, on that one. And I like the way you described, what was it, bookkeeper?
A bookend manager.
A bookend manager.
The two sides of the week,
I love
Monday and Friday.
I love it. I'm going to have to remember that one moving forward. I'd also be remiss not to say that because we're talking about sales education, as some people know out there now, I recently, of course, joined Sales Impact Academy to really try and solve against some of this stuff. So I'd be remiss knowing you've got your Island t-shirt on there, to also represent Sales Impact Academy. So salesimpact.io, be sure to check it out for your go-to-market education. Now, let's go back to your career here, Ash, because Symantec, you had a long run. And again, we're talking a lot about eras here, and we're in an era where tenure of, I think you were 8 years or in and around that time period, or maybe even longer, isn't as commonplace now as it was then. So why did you stay as long as you did? And maybe just walk us through some of the milestones of that growth journey.
Yeah, it's a great question, Alex. So I think like here's my answer to that question. When you become fully vested in something, and when you've been given an opportunity and you've developed trust with your compadres, with your colleagues, with your managers, with the wider business, and you feel really bought into something, you feel really accountable towards something, it's then very difficult to leave. And if you layer on top of that, for me, I was fortunate enough to receive promotions literally every 19 months to 2 years. Every single 2-year anniversary, I was doing a different job. So I started in mid-market as an SDR. I then moved to commercial sales. They then took me from commercial sales and put me into a hunter team where companies have big propensity to spend, but have never done so. So I did that. And we did an okay job there, and then we moved up, and it was running the biggest accounts in the company, and then it was global account management, and then it was first line sales leadership, and then it was second line. So there was always a new challenge for me, Alex, and because I'd built that trust by being accountable, by producing results, that really kept me locked into that company. But look, it wasn't without its challenges. Big company like Symantec, I ended up in a situation where I remember going in for an interview for my first big enterprise job, which is that hunter job I spoke about. And I was so nervous. Like my results spoke for themselves, but I was so nervous. And I messed up the interview, and the VP of the UK said to the hiring manager, he said, I don't think this guy's ready. And the hiring manager was like, look, I've seen what this guy's done. I've seen the customer relationships that he's built. I've seen the deals that he's written. Like I'm ready to put my neck on the block for this guy. And the VP said, well, okay, it's on your head, be it. So little areas like that, right the way through to towards the end of my tenure at Symantec, when I'd taken on my first line management job, I remember sitting in my first QBR, and the senior leader said, he said, right, okay, Ash, what are you going to do for us this year? You know, what's the number you're calling? What do you think you can achieve? And I put up 200% a target, which was a huge growth. It was just, nobody had seen anything like it. And he said, oh, no. I remember the words exactly, Alex. He said, what you don't understand, fella, is, and I thought, oh, I don't like that. What you don't understand. And I said to him, I said, what do you mean? He said, well, what you don't understand, fella, is that, you're now a senior leader and you've got a big quota. You're not going to do 200%. It's not like being an 80. And I turned around to him and I said, do you know what? If that's the case, then you'll have my resignation tomorrow. And yes, it was a bit of bravado on my side. Of course it is. But I meant it, because I didn't want to work in an organisation where I was confined to doing 100 or 110%. Who knew whether that was good or bad or indifferent? I wanted to stretch us and create goals that people wanted to buy into and be part of, and stretch us so far that we could really achieve fantastic results. I still remember our goal at the time when I set up my first team was to become the most performant and trusted team inside of cybersecurity. And how we were going to measure that tactically is that I wanted by year 2 to be the highest performance Symantec team. I wanted to have the best customer references, and we did it inside of 12 months. We took a team of people, 40 accounts in the UK, outgrossed our whole entire New York business inside that first year. And we did it again and again and again. I remember the leader that said that 110% wasn't possible was pretty shocked when we came in at 228 and then 200 the following year, and just delivered phenomenal growth.
Man, they say numbers cure all, and my goodness, you really cured it all in that regard, Ash. What a story! I could sense a passion from you as you were kind of reciting that and reliving it. I think that the fact that you were thinking big, but not only thinking big, you were acting big and operating big and getting people to rally around that way of thinking. It's incredibly powerful. And it's a bit like the 4-minute mile. Everything is believed to be impossible until it's done. And then the moment it's done, all of a sudden, people start doing it time and time and time again. But it starts with belief, and then it's followed up by action. And then ultimately, as mentioned, once you break through the floodgates, all of a sudden, people start being able to execute with a level of consistency. So thank you so much for sharing that story. Now, as we start to think about, some of these roles that you've had, I'm conscious on the podcast, we've actually spent less time talking about roles like being a global account manager within a company like a Symantec, for example. So I'd love to just double tap on that experience of actually selling to global accounts and really what that entailed for you, what maybe some of the secrets are behind being able to really be successful in a role of that caliber.
Yes, that's a great question. And again, it starts with leading indicators and doing the right thing and doing the right behavior and getting round a customer. So, true global account managers just don't deal with 3 or 4 people in an organization. You have to get so wide. You have to speak to people in all areas of the business to understand how that business is ticking, what makes that business tick, what is the real pains, what are the real areas of growth opportunity, and take all that information that you gather and find the right people in those organizations to bring that to bear. And quite often, Alex, those people aren't the C-suite. For us as salespeople, it's like, hey, get to the CIO, get to the CISO, get to the head of this and the head of that. But quite often you find pockets of real influence and real power that haven't got the job title to match. So finding those people, finding those sort of, we've all heard of the challenger sale. I like to think of it as the challenger customer, and finding those challenger customers inside of an organization, and then being able to set those guys and girls up for success and really get those people bought into what you're trying to do has helped me immensely over that period of time. And then basically almost help me do my job for me and take our proposition, whatever it may be, to an economic buyer where it gets procured. So that would be one of my biggest tips that I think sometimes is ignored. And the only way you get to find out about those people is to be really inquisitive and to do the hard work and graft like we talked about, and getting around that organization, meeting people and putting the hard yards in. They're not just going to show themselves. In fact, those type of people are the ones that want to hide away and not be seen at all. Yeah. They're the hardest guys. So yeah, that would be one of my biggest tips. It actually just thinking about that, because it's obviously been a few years since I did global account management, but it kind of takes me back to another little story. One of my biggest failures in life and in business for sure. I remember it pretty vividly. So we just had our first baby. I'm sleeping on the cold floor of our living room. It was like a wooden floor at the time, and I'm sleeping on the floor in like this blow up bed. And with my weight, it used to deflate every night. I'd end up on the floor like this, and the next morning I'd be at the airport having to go to Hong Kong or wherever. It was just ridiculous from one side to the other. But I remember this situation really vividly. I just picked up one of the big banks in the UK. And literally 3 months into my tenure, they decided to replace our endpoint product. It was huge. Everyone in our business, from the CEO down, was disappointed, right? As you can imagine. And I remember the call now from the chief security officer. I went outside, sat in my car, and got the call because the baby was crying and everything else. Sat in the car, and he said, "Ash," he said, "in your 3 months, you've done a great job. Your team's done a great job, but we'd already made the decision to move." And I was like, And I remember it a Monday morning, and I was waiting for the call all weekend to decide like whether we'd stayed in or whether we'd lost. But the decision had already been made. And at that time, rather than sort of get defensive and feel sorry for myself, I said to him at the time, I said, "Look," I said, "don't worry." I said, you've made a wise decision based on what had happened previously. Like, you haven't got the support from my organization that you should have done. What I can commit to you right now, though, is we're going to double down, and we're going to do more and more and more. And despite losing that endpoint, we're going to continue to educate your team. We're going to continue to try and be in the trenches with you. We'll help you even with the transition from one to the other to try and earn your trust again. And he couldn't believe it. He was like, I've never heard anybody say that. Like, just couldn't believe it. And I said, well, it's true. And you'll see over the next coming months what I mean by that. And basically, Alex, that happened. And they rolled out the competitor, or tried to roll it out. We continued in there. So we flew around the world, and this is the global account management thing. We visited everyone that we could, everyone with any sort of influence, any sort of opinion. And we just discussed what our product could do. And we even tried to help with the move to the other product. So we did that. We continued on, and then one day I got a call, and there was a new power base in the organization, and I got a call, and the guy rang me up and said, "Right, I need you in Canary Wharf tomorrow morning. We've had a massive issue, and I need you in here." And I was like, "Okay, all right. No time to speak now, but be in tomorrow morning." Okay. So grab my technical guy, off we go, and we sit in this little room, and we're overlooking all of Canary Wharf. And I remember it like it was yesterday. And he sat down and he said, "Right," he said, "tell me this." He said, "We've had a massive issue with the new provider. Could you replace all of their technology and roll your latest product out within 6 weeks? We've had a blue screen issue. The board are annoyed. It's even reached their level. And a lot of people's executive bonuses are based on this, getting this fixed." And the natural reaction as a salesperson is to say, "Yeah, of course we could do it. Like, give us a chance, of course we could do it." But I didn't, because I wasn't sure we could do it. And I turned to our techie guy, Paul Murgatroyd, the top guy, and I said, "Paul," I said, can we do this?" And Paul just sat back like this. I was thinking, come on, Paul, in a minute, like, at least say something, at least say we can. He was like, yeah, we can do that. I was like, right. I said, if Paul thinks we can do it, then, we'll move heaven and earth to try and get it done. Long story short, between him, a few consultants, some backline guys, full support of our CEO downwards, we got that done inside of 5 weeks. Inside of 5 weeks, yeah. We rolled out to 150,000 devices in 5 weeks. No issues at all. They were happy. Then what happened was our business said to us, it was getting towards the end of the quarter, as we all know, end of quarter pressures. Hey, Ash, what's happening with that endpoint deal at that bank? And I said, look, guys, what we need to realize now is that we've got their trust, right? So rather than just going and hitting them with an endpoint bill, let's parlay that trust and look at other areas, because they had 150 different vendors in there. There was a load of complexity, load of different cost. They had vendors doing specific things that we could have done. I said, why don't we take that trust? We've got the executives behind us now. People are being paid their bonuses, and let's parlay that into something much bigger. And anyway, long story short, inside of 4 months, we took that situation. We didn't do the tactical endpoint deal, which still would have been a great deal for the company, and we delivered a $50 million deal. And we think it's one of the biggest deals inside of cybersecurity SaaS. We did it inside of 4 months, and it was a deal that probably even impacted even a large cap company like Symantec, their share price at the time. It was just a phenomenal deal. And what we then did, Alex, is we didn't just rest on our laurels and take that deal like the guys perhaps had done previously with the endpoint, just left it thinking, they'll never replace us. We continue to sell in there. We continue to drive value. We continue to explain to the customer the value that we've driven, and we're able to do another $70 million over the next 18 months inside of that one account. Just phenomenal. Remember, the whole team that I'd inherited, I'd come in on a base of about 18 or 20 million revenue. So that's the size of that. But it's interesting because it was the biggest disappointment. I remember it like yesterday, on the cold floor, right the way through to staying with it, putting our hard yards in, committing, being accountable, delivering what we committed, and then getting the great results that followed.
Well, I mean, that was almost like a mini masterclass in global account management, I guess a small element of fortune in terms of the way things panned out, but ultimately that component of trust, the way that you were actually able to look above the number, look above so many other aspects, and actually lean in on the fact that you had built a trust bridge that could help you get so much more, but not only help you get so much more, that could enable you to drive so much more value for the customer. There are a couple of moments I almost had a giggle to myself when you said I had a base of 18 to 20 million. I thought, you were doing all right then.
We'd love for that now, wouldn't we?
I thought you meant your basic salary, so that was fun.
Yeah.
So no, thank you so much for sharing that story, and I think that there was again so much to take out of that. Ash, we're going to have to fast forward onto really last couple of questions on the basis of everything that we got out of that. But, you've gone from being in some very significant companies in terms of size and employee count, etc., into a much younger business, right, that has a lot of potential. You're obviously moving at lightning pace, but it's a big difference, right? Big shift. So just walk us through your rationale as to why you decided to take that step, and maybe how you're feeling since you've made that type of transition.
Yeah, it's a great question, and so fortunate and privileged to be given the opportunity to lead Europe for Ireland. Ireland are the enterprise browser. We're creating that brand new category, and just dead excited to be part of the first team on the ground. It's myself, it's Alison Black and Matt Smith to name the guys that came with me, and try and take this category mainstream. Look, it wasn't an easy decision. As I said before, I was there with 120 people in my organization, full P&L management, kind of like I guess the top of a European salesperson could get to, really, before CRO. But just the law, just the the massive goal that this company has, the fact that the TAM is unparalleled and undefined, the fact that the biggest investors in the world have put money in, the fact that I'm working with leadership and friends from the past that I trust and respect and love, and just having all of that put into one and being part of that kind of founding team outside of America was just so exciting. I just couldn't ignore it. Like the opportunity came up, and I kind of like I was on my path, and oh yeah, okay. But then it just kept hitting me at the back of my head, and I thought, you know what, I cannot ignore this opportunity. I can't get to the end of my career having not done this. So yeah, that was some of the reasons.
Yeah.
And I think we're in an amazing space that, we've had 158 different conversations inside the first 4.5 months of being there inside of Europe, and 99% of those conversations have been like, wow, this is different. This could change the way I do things. Well, seriously, you guys can do that? And you're right, from being a guy that's worked in big companies, and it was always just an additive feature or function or the next version of this. This is totally different and totally game changing.
Wow, well, what a way to pitch the solution there, right? I mean, it was a great framing. One thing that I know about you, I guess, offline, Ash, is that you're back in the trenches now, right? You're not one of those leaders that kind of looks at things zoomed out and it's trying to get everyone to do the grunt work per se, but like you're very much in the trenches, making it happen, living and breathing what you do. And I think that it's really admirable to be able to see you just make that transition, to be able to shift yourself from managing such a significant team, as you said, with P&L responsibility, to getting back on the battlefield, so to speak, right? And just getting after it every day, making it happen.
Do you know what though, Alex, on that point, and you'll know this with the way that you go to market and the way that your character is driven, we never stop doing that. And I think that's the point. Like, we talked about the bookend manager, right? People like me and you have never stopped doing that. We consistently wake up every morning and think, right, who do we prospect to today? How do we move the ball forward? How do we increase this? Or, that's how we're wired. So actually the transition from, P&L responsibility, big team, to over to you now, Ash, and your team, and very small team, go do. It was actually quite easy. So I think, that would be one of my big recommendations to young sales leaders is just don't lose that desire. Don't lose that waking up every morning thinking about prospecting and moving the ball forward, because you're going to get so many opportunities in your career where that will need to come to the fore. Don't be the bookend sales manager.
Yes, don't be the bookend. I always say as well, Ash, I say I'm still an SDR today. I forget my job title and whatever it becomes in the future. I'm a lifelong SDR. That's the way I see it in my mind. And that will never, ever change. And I love that fact. Ash, this has been a really fascinating episode so far. Certainly a lot of stories that have been really impactful. You're going to know what's coming next if you watch any of the previous episodes. But as the final question here, what would your best piece of advice be to that person out there that wants to go from good to elite level in their career?
Yeah, great question, Alex. So 2 key things. One is manage the leading indicators. Don't be worried about trailing indicators or anything like that, trailing revenue or anything. Just focus on yourself and what you can do every day to move the ball forward. And then the second piece of advice is don't be afraid of failure. Like, I've failed over and over again in my life. Probably you've done the same. If we look at sports stars, my favorite sports star of all time was Michael Jordan. His famous quote was, look, he'd missed 9,000 shots in his career. 9,000 shots. Like, he had to take the game-winning shot 26 times and he failed. He missed it. He lost over 300 games, and yet he's the greatest. So don't be afraid of failure. Embrace it. Keep putting yourself to the plate. Keep swinging at them, and you'll be successful.
That's how you wrap up a podcast, Ash. Have you enjoyed being on?
I've loved it. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolute pleasure. I want you to make one promise to me, Ash, which is one day you got to write a book, man. You got so many stories. Yeah. It'll be criminal not to put it on paper at some point. So hopefully we'll get to all read that one day.
Appreciate it, sir. Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. So if you've gained any form of value from watching or listening to this today, again, if it's on YouTube, please be sure to smash that like button, comment, share, and subscribe. And if you're listening on any of the podcasting platforms, please just take 2 minutes, write us a 5-star review and help us grow the reach of the Elite Level podcast. Once again, I hope that you've enjoyed, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.